Hello and welcome. Today, we are going to take a journey back in time to explore one of the most passionate and expressive eras in all of musical history. I'm talking about the Romantic period. We're going to break down what made this time so unique and, of course, meet a couple of its most iconic figures.
Welcome to Special Needs Corner.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll dig into the big question, what even is Romanticism? Then, we'll tune in to the new sounds and musical styles that defined the whole era. And finally, we get to meet two of its biggest superstars, the flashy violin virtuoso Niccolò Paganini and the soulful poet of the piano, Frédéric Chopin.
All right, so what was actually happening in the world to spark this musical revolution? You see, the Romantic period wasn't just a new playlist. It was more like a massive cultural earthquake that shook Europe back in the early 19th century. It was all about challenging the old rules and completely redefining art, literature, and especially music.
This brings us to the big question, right? What really makes a piece of music romantic instead of, say, classical? What was this new feeling in the air? Well, it all really boils down to a few key ingredients that gave this era its totally unique flavor.
First and foremost, raw emotion. Okay, so before this, music was often super elegant, balanced, and followed some pretty strict rules. You could almost think of it as being mathematical. But the Romantics, they wanted to smash those rules. They believed music should be a channel for intense feelings. We're talking soaring joy, crushing sorrow, passionate love, all the high-stakes drama.
Next up is individuality. And this was a huge shift. See, before, composers were often seen as skilled workers, almost like craftspeople, who were hired by a church or a noble family. But in the Romantic era, the composer became the star of the show. A unique artist, a genius with their own personal story to tell. Their music, it was basically their diary. And where did these personal stories often lead? Well, straight into the wild world of the imagination. Romantic artists were obsessed with the mysterious and the magical. Think ancient legends, spooky ghost stories, and epic fantasies. This fascination with the supernatural and the unknown became a massive well of inspiration.
So all of this, the emotion, the individuality, the imagination, it can all be wrapped up in one key phrase: emotional subjectivity. This is really the bedrock of all Romantic art, and it just means that the artist's inner world, their own personal feelings and experiences, became the main event. The music wasn't just about making pretty sounds anymore, it was a direct window right into the composer's soul.
Now, with all these new ideas floating around about emotion and being an individual, it's really no surprise that composers started inventing entirely new ways to write music. Let's take a look at how this totally changed the sound of the era.
This new emotional focus led to brand new styles of music. Three types in particular really came into their own during this period. First, there's the art song, which basically fused poetry with music for a solo singer and piano. Then you have program music, which is instrumental music designed to tell a specific story or paint a picture, all without a single word. And finally, there was nationalistic music, where composers used the folk songs and dances of their own countries to celebrate their national identity.
You know, you really can't talk about this huge shift without mentioning the giant who had a foot in both worlds, Ludwig van Beethoven. He started out writing in that older, more restrained classical style, but his later stuff became so powerful, so personal, and so emotional that he pretty much kicked the door wide open for the Romantic era to begin. He was the bridge that everybody else walked across.
So let's see these ideas in action by taking a look at our first Romantic superstar. He's the perfect example of pure individuality and just almost supernatural talent. I'm talking about the violin virtuoso.
Let's meet Niccolò Paganini, and that's pronounced Niccolò Paganini. He was born in Genoa, Italy, and he would go on to completely change how people thought about what was even possible on the violin.
He was, and I mean this seriously, the original rock star of the violin. His concerts were these legendary, sold-out events all across Europe. His technical skill was so far beyond what anyone thought was humanly possible that it actually started rumors. People genuinely whispered that the only way he could play like that was if he'd sold his soul to the devil.
If you want to hear what all the fuss was about, you have to look up his key works. His 24 caprices for solo violin are still considered like the ultimate Olympic challenge for violinists today. And a piece like La Campanella, which means the little bell, is famous for its lightning-fast, bell-like notes that just perfectly show off his jaw-dropping technique.
Okay,
Now for a totally different kind of romantic expression. We're going to go from the flashy showman of the violin to a composer known for his incredibly intimate and poetic work for the piano.
Let's talk about Frédéric Chopin. That's pronounced Frédéric Chopin. He was born in Zillezowa, Poland, and his instrument, his voice, was the piano.
He earned the title Poet of the Piano, and honestly it fits him perfectly. While Paganini was this big showman playing for huge crowds, Chopin was way more intimate. He dedicated almost his entire life to just one instrument, the piano, and he explored every single shade of emotion it could possibly produce, from the most delicate whispers to these huge, powerful statements. His works are just filled with that emotional subjectivity we were talking about. I mean, you listen to pieces like his Revolutionary Etude, which people say he wrote when he heard his home country of Poland was being invaded, and it is just bursting with this patriotic anger and passion. His music is delicate, powerful, and so deeply personal. It really does make him the poet of his instrument.
Thanks for watching.